How would you like to live your best life by connecting with Infinite Source? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guests are channel Rebecca Dawson and her international collective, The Masters. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Guys Radio. Very special guest today is Rebecca Dawson. She's a return guest. She's been on the show before. She's a noted channeler, and she works with a collective called The Masters. And today we're going to talk about a lot of what's going on in the world, all the changes we see, how people are waking up, ascension symptoms, and also about the collective agreements that we've all been living under and how they're all now under scrutiny, if you will. She's also got a new book. It's called Fu, and it's been channeled in through The Masters, The Return of the Magnetic Human, embracing the human capacity to create reality and preparing us for this shift. So welcome back to Guys Radio, my friend and a wonderful channel, Rebecca Dawson.
Hi, thanks for having me on again. It's nice to be with you.
Let's start right at the beginning. You are a channel, and I guess for folks out there who are not that familiar with it, you got this gift at age of 18. You were studying to be an architect. What happened?
I was giving some advice to someone one day, which I had been doing since I was quite young. For some reason, people tend to come to me for advice. And I was sitting there speaking with them. They were going through a particularly difficult breakup. And all of a sudden, I felt very expanded. I describe it as being like the Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters. I felt really, really huge. And suddenly it wasn't my voice anymore. And there was a whole lot of information that came through for that person about why this was happening for them and why it was important for them to be experiencing. And it seemed like a few minutes, and it was actually an hour when I had come out of it. So that was the beginning.
Now, when you work with the Masters, and how did that name, did they tell you this is who we are and we call ourselves the Masters, or did you come out with that moniker for them?
Well, they always talk about mastery and how they're leading humanity back into their own sense of mastery. In the beginning, for me, it was a being called Serapis Bey, and some people have identified that particular vibration as a master. And then I had Saint Germain for many, many years, who's still with me, and Kuthumi as well. So I used to bring them through individually, and they all had very different tones and different approaches to the subject matter. And then eventually it all sort of braided and intertwined together as a collective energy.
Did you ask yourself why you had been granted this gift, and did you want it?
It's certainly nothing I aspired to. I think it's actually quite disruptive, and I'm sure if you interviewed other channelers, they would say to you that it's not an easy life experience to be a channeler. It's like living in two or more different worlds, actually. And starting to channel was really just the beginning of the challenge for me. After that was figuring out how that fits into my life. Can I have a normal life? What does this mean for my direction? It's a challenge.
Has it with the risk of a personal question, has it affected your personal life and how you live day to day? And you had to switch careers, and it seems like every day is an open book. You're
Definitely.
Creating. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Thank you for asking. Not many people really ask that question. It has, because there are conventional ways of doing things in the world, such as getting married, having children, having a career. And what I've discovered is, particularly because we're going through this huge shift in consciousness right now, is that there's often a conflict that goes on between how it can be done and how it should be done. Or traditionally how things are done and how they could be done. And I know that, and this has been quite personal, we've been speaking about the shift from 3D to 5D for so long, and we can't do things in the same way anymore out of obligation or commitment or doing things by the book. And I do remember one night I was giving a a channeled seminar all about relationships and how relationships are shifting. And I remember driving away from that seminar and going home to my family. And the realization struck me that we're talking about all these things, but I'm not really walking the talk. And that's very disruptive, because as anyone that's on a spiritual unfolding knows, it's not comfortable, it's disruptive, it's destructive.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it has been destructive, but it's been destructive in breaking down limitations, and it's not always comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned is I have to live it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the greatest challenge.
Very well stated. Let's talk about this new book. It's called Fu, and it's about the magnetic resonance of the human, the new human. And in layman's terms, and I worked my way through it, and it's you have to go slowly, but then it starts to open up as you read it. And at first I was struggling a little bit, and then as I got about 100 pages into it, I'm like, okay, I get it. And basically, it seems like we've been living in a kind of an electrical grid, and then everything's connected in certain ways. If I do this, I get that, and it all works together. And if like on a grid for your energy, if something gets rewired or something, the whole thing might not work. Whereas in the magnetic resonance, we are constantly creating moment by moment. So it's eternal. So things kind of get flipped over. Death becomes, and life are the same thing. We exhale and we create, we inhale and accept and experience who we are. There's a lot of concepts like that. Explain to us how the difference between the electric and the magnetic resonance of humans, and why it's so important and why it's happening now.
Well, the electrical grid, as we call it, is this grid of thought-based belief. And thought-based belief, well, thought, as we know it biologically, tends to be measured electrically. And the truth is that even though we could say, well, we're electric beings, we exist within a reality that is based on electrical transference of energy. So when we see ourselves within that grid or matrix, we're like points on a circuit board, and we donate energy to keep everything running. So we get up in the morning and we do what we need to do. We go out to work and we donate, because we're aware that we're a part of this grid network. Now, we donate not only because it seems like the right thing to do for the collective to keep everything running, but we also donate in the hope that that energy is going to go around that circuit and come back to us. The only issue is that it's a fallible setup, which means that it only takes one point in the circuit board to break down, right, one factor to not line up, and that energy doesn't come back to you. It's also very, very difficult to be convinced to step out of that, because if you step out of it, you're not a part of it, you're not going to get anything, you're going to die. So that's all electrically based creation. And the truth is that it's very difficult to move around that. You kind of have to stick to your position or try and move around it in a grid-like way. So if we think about thought as electrical thought in our view and in the Masters' view is based on memory. So it's just a recurring pattern. When we get into real creation, it's really about vibration. And vibration is not so much that electrical transference, it's more that magnetic field. And that magnetic field always returns to you. And a lot of spiritual teachings in history, particularly the esoterics in Egypt and earlier than that, the Atlantean period, always talked about maintaining your own energy, recirculating it around to yourself, because that's where we can really build resonance for vibration and then start to call things to us, which means that no donation is required to get a return. And if we're not donating energy, but we're actually just nourishing and nurturing our own sovereign beings, we can create completely new realities. We're not sacrificing anything.
Does this, because I interview so many folks and I've interviewed other channels, and they seem to speak about similar concepts, but in different ways. We talked about the collective, the agreements through the guides, Paul Selig's guides, And I've been speaking with Joe Vitale from The Secret, and he is very much into Ho'oponopono, and I got myself certified in that. And it seems like it has some resonance here, because with Ho'oponopono, the goal is to clean everything, kind of to get everything out of the way so the pure energy is available to us. We get to the 0 point, we get the data out of the way, and we can create. Do you find that you hear, and there are different ways of saying similar things? We come at it from different angles based on some of the spiritual teachers and messengers like yourself that are out there?
Absolutely. And I love that there's so many people talking about it in different ways, because that makes it accessible to people no matter where they're sitting with their own belief. Or with something like Ho'oponopono, as I understand it, it's a return to self.
Yes.
It's a return to self, and that's the food. It's not giving anything away, it's actually bringing it all back. And it's like planting a tree and bearing fruit, but not tasting any of the fruit for yourself, but sending it to market. You want to send it to market because then you can earn money, because then you can have status, because then you're servicing the community. But this is now about eating our own fruit. And this is the return of humanity to that kind of self-empowerment and sovereignty, where we can actually now begin to really generate the vibrational frequency and resonance to be able to build a new version of reality for the collective.
That's so well stated. My special guest, Rebecca Dawson, channel from Perth, Australia. So as part of that, and these concepts, you really have to wrap your head, if you're a layman like myself, you really have to wrap your head around it. But one of the notions is the sun is, we look at the sun in a new way. So when we're in the electrical grid, you do this and you get that, and everything can be uniform, but that's limiting. There's a cap on that. But if you look at how nature works, where you plant seeds in the ground and every little tree and sapling grows in a different way, that's because they're not tied into the same matrix, if you will, that we are in our culture and society. Could you elaborate on that a bit, Rebecca?
Yeah, well, let me ground that back into our concept of the original Earth design. So Earth is actually designed to be a creative Garden of Eden. We can see that in our own genetic signatures. None of us are designed to be the same. So even as ourselves, as aspects of source consciousness in form, we're all unique, just as every single plant on the planet is unique. So the electrical matrix of repetitive thought that we feed into all the time, that it demands repetition and consistency. It demands us to do the same things every day to get certain results. But what it does is it just produces more of the same.
It seems so. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the unique nature of who we are is to do something different all the time. But the system that we participate with doesn't want us to do that. Because if we do that, we're not necessarily donating to that system and keeping it running.
And as part of that, it seems to me that it's even becoming more so with that, the expectation and the limiting of creativity and the uniformity of how the planet, who's ever running the planet, wants us to behave. And I notice that's more now than ever, and people are buying into it. Whether it's, I notice out here in Southern California, the way people drive, they tailgate you, they're in a hurry, they'll cut you off just to get to the red light. It's like, I'm doing this and because I want to get that. And there's no care about the other person. It's just, I got to get here. And it's not almost like, doesn't feel like it's rude. It's just like, I got to do this. And you don't matter. You're just in the way. So get out of the way. And it seems like that's part of the training, the cultural training that we're getting now. And it seems to me that it's more dialed up than it was, 20, 30 years ago, even. What's your take on that?
I love that you bring that up. I think that was really, really brilliant, because the one thing that keeps us in that system of donating our energy in the hope of some return is the assumption of time. It doesn't continue to operate unless we subscribe to the pressure of time. So of course we have diaries, we have schedules, we're aging, we have to hurry up and get this done. If there was no sense or belief in time, there would be no participation. So this is so brilliant, because creation itself can only exist in a state of timelessness. That's what you call the 0 point field, or the what is, or the space between spaces, as the masters call it. That's where creation happens. It doesn't happen within time. If we're actually very subscribed to a timeline, no creation can happen there. It's just a continuation of what was into the future, permutated and permeated slightly differently. So it's already happening. There's no sense of sovereignty in time, and there's no sense of creation. So in that case, with what you're describing, with people being in a rush, they're in, I've got to be here and donate energy to this or I won't survive. In those moments, it's the spontaneous action. It's the, I'm going to take my time. It's dropping into a sense of timelessness, where creative inspiration and new energy really starts to bring in the things that are possible for us, not the things that are probable for us.
Now, as part of that, Rebecca, is there, it seems like then there's actually more space than there is density. And part of this, the return to the magnetic source of magnetic resonance, is being able to dial into the space that's so ample so we can create, versus being constricted in a system that keeps us tethered to time.
I love that. And I love the way that you describe that. And people will often say, well, what's the best way to do that? Spontaneous action. Being in a space where you can say, I don't know. I mean, some people use meditative practices to try and quiet the mind. My favorite thing is to think about the cosmos and looking up at the night sky and saying, well, where is my attention? My attention immediately goes to the stars. But what about the 99.999%, which is all of the space? Exactly. And so it's just shifting your focus. I call it slightly to the left. Just go left a little bit. Even when I'm speaking to someone in a conversation, if I want inspiration and if I want to create something new in this conversation, I'll actually just shift my gaze slightly to the left into the space. And it actually takes me out of time and out of engagement, and boom, the inspiration is there, which is not so different to the state of channeling.
Wow. In the book Fu, there's breathing is very important. And most people in our collective believe that we breathe in, we take something in, we exhale, and we eliminate it. And a lot of practices, even meditation or yoga or whatever, a lot of breathe in, breathe out. In Fu, we're being told that you think of it in a contrarian way, where when you're breathing in, you're actually experiencing yourself. And when you're exhaling, you are putting yourself into a creative space, if you will. Is that true?
It is counterintuitive to what we've believed. And I love that the masters challenge us with inversions like that all of the time. Because it is, again, the focus on the self, because we are the creation space. So every time we inhale, we are bringing attention to that creative force. And the exhale is merely the expression of it. So it's actually the inhalation that is important, because that's what's life affirming and life sustaining.
And another thing that I found fascinating in the book, and I practiced it last night when I was reading it, it was talking about seeing beyond limits. And the page came up. I had a little bout with something last night, and it said about pain that you could go beyond the belief of the pain, go beyond it. And I started to imagine myself going beyond the discomfort, the pain that I felt, and it started to dissipate. Now, when I went to bed, it did come back and some other stuff happened. But in that brief time where I was reading and also dealing with discomfort, by placing myself in a position to transcend the limit of the pain, the borders, it dissipated. Is that true? I mean, it worked for me. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Was that just a mindset thing or a heart space or?
Well, pain in and of itself is fascinating, because it's so helpful. And we're taught, again, to release pain, to get rid of pain, to remove things from ourselves. And that's not so different from donating into an electrical grid, because it's all about what are you removing from your own system. The practice of Fu is the opposite of that. So instead of rejecting something, we actually embrace it. And so in doing that, you actually bring it back to wholeness, and you have the ability to drop through it, and it brings your attention to the present moment. So pain's incredibly helpful because it brings our attention back to this. It actually brings you back to the void space. So you talk about, and referencing the book, moving beyond the limitation of pain. My own personal practice of this, I get migraines quite regularly, is to actually drop through it, to actually go so deep into the core of the pain sitting within my body that I've dropped into the 0 point of it. And in that, there's a new cycle of a new reality that's birthed in that moment. So I find pain is helpful because it brings me back to this.
Now, in the book, as I was reading and preparing notes, I just kept jotting down a lot of different phrases in the books and sentences. So let me throw a couple of them out there and see what you have to say about it. So here's one. The principle of Fu is that all things return. All things return. That's not a cycle of repetition. That's returning to the source.
Yes. We see that with the sun. We see that with fusion energy. We see it with all things in life. We just don't believe it for ourselves necessarily.
Okay, here's another one. Divine infant cells. In the same vein, if you will, of what the masters are teaching, I recently read the Masters of the Far East, and they talk about how people in the past could live these masters, if you will, that were discovered in this book by Baird Spalding, to hundreds and hundreds of years, and yet they would look young like yourself. And it was because they had divine infant cells. And I've been doing a practice for about a year now of expelling my old dying cells, which we do all the time anyhow, and only replacing them with divine infant cells. And I have actually found that I have more strength than I did a year and 2 years ago, physical, from doing workouts and stuff like that. And I'm a boomer, and so I'm aging and stuff, but in most instances, I feel fantastic, and I attribute it to that. But my point is, the divine infant cells, that concept seems also in line with what the masters are talking about with Fu.
Yeah, it's the whole regeneration that happens, the rebirth that happens, the reset that happens every time you completely return to yourself. Again, what keeps us in a belief of deterioration and continual exchange is time. So it's interesting the way time comes into this again with cells, because I think it was Zach Bush that said, he's a really interesting guy. I heard him say in one of his interviews that cells actually regenerate themselves every 1,000th of a second or something like that.
Wow.
And it's true, because if you're not in that space of measurability of time, regeneration is happening in every moment, because the truth of the universe is that everything returns to source. Everything is source. So it's always happening.
So what the takeaway then for our listeners and viewers, a lot of people think, oh, my dad had a heart attack and died at 50, so I'm going to have a heart attack and die at 50. And I've seen that happen. I had a friend from high school. His dad had a heart attack at 50. He had a heart attack at 50, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. And I think if you put the intention that that's just my lot in life, you're actually bringing it towards you, where if you work with the space, if you will, that's out there, you don't have to follow the epigenetic code for yourself.
I would agree. And again, everything is based on a presumption of time, that history will dictate the future. That's that mirror reality. So if you look at that as the x-axis on a linear graph, when you move into a state of timelessness, it actually releases you from the inevitability of time, and it allows you to actually create a new timeline or a new reality or a new cell or a new moment there. Creation only happens in a state of timelessness. So I like to see that state of timelessness as the y-axis. And many teachers have been talking for many years about the now moment and how powerful it is. Some people talk about getting into the vortex. What is that? That is the state of timelessness, where it is, I am, it is in this moment, this is all that exists. That's the reset. And that's what actually elevates you and allows you to now begin to be less subject to that timeline of predictability. So it's the same with healing. It's the same with creation. It's the same with, I want more to happen with my business. It's the state of timelessness that's where the magic is.
You know, another thing you had mentioned, and it popped up in my mind when I was preparing for the interview, Rebecca. And again, my special guest is Rebecca Dawson, channeled from Perth, Australia. Her new book is called Foo. But we were talking about, I remember last time we spoke, you said, and I think it might have been even offline, you said, oh, if you have, you know, anger, which I was talking about anger, and you said, it's not you. Don't worry about your anger because it's not coming from you necessarily. And so I started doing a practice just a couple of days ago where for some reason, I reached out to my ancestors and said, I want to assuage the anger and other things in our DNA, maybe the pain we've gone through and things that have violence or whatever over all the many lives that they lived over the, you know, thousands and thousands of years. And I had a heart opening that occurred while I was doing this. It just went poop. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So this morning I did it for my past lives and did the same thing, trying to work on that. I guess the point is, if we're open to doing some of these things, if we're open to possibilities and not constricted by what we're told, this is the way it is, here's your timelines, here's your schedule, here's what you have to do to survive, that there's amazing things that we can do and results we can get if we just open ourselves up.
I'm just going to move into channel if that's okay.
Please.
Greetings to you, Blessed One. We are with you. With every notion that you are bringing to us on this day, it's always going to come back to the same experience. And the experience here, and the question from you is, how do I change what is happening? It's all about change. How do I improve? How do I get better? How do I heal? How do I release myself? If you are in a state of linear belief, which means that you subscribe to the belief in time, the belief in a past and a future, there is very little that you can do. And that's the sense of powerlessness that humans feel on a daily basis, many times a moment-to-moment basis. The only way to completely shift the parameters of your experience is to come out of dormancy in time and wake up into the present moment reality, because that's the only place that life actually exists. Everything that you are experiencing within a timeline is a dream. The illusion of the earth reality is time. That time is where the dream is. So if you're trying to correct a dream, if you're trying to correct a past life, if you're trying to change your future, you're trying to change an illusion. And while that may be a very interesting exercise for you and it might make you feel more empowered, it can also be frustrating. I mean, there are those that are here on the planet at this time to play with changing the dream. There are many advanced beings on the planet at this time that are actually here to change the view of history. And they're here to change the view of history, to assist the collective human consciousness in believing in a different future. So there are those that do that. But for you and for many like you who are toiling to try to change your life and change your future, there is no more effective and simple way than moving into the state of timelessness. Because if you're trying to play with time, you're trying to change the dream.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
And in essence, what you want to do is to wake up out of the dream. So let the beings that are here trying to change history do it. Yes, for those who are unable to wake up out of the dream, but those who are listening to us on this day are listening because you have the ability to wake up out of it.
So how best can I serve them? I was doing this for myself, but I thought I could help all my ancestors and help all my past lives. And affect the present in a positive way, acknowledging the fact that everything is happening at the same time, because time is not linear the way we see it. Time is all happening at once. So you're saying then the best thing I can do and we can do is to focus on experiencing the now, working with the space that's available to us, and create.
Yes, you do something different from that space of spontaneity and timelessness. Now, what you say is true. Of course, all of these other aspects that exist simultaneously with you through the appearance and the illusion of time. If you are in the present moment, you are bringing all of those aspects into the present moment with you, which means that anything new that you do in the present moment that is inspired, that is about doing something radical, that is doing something spontaneous or heartfelt or joyful, they're also doing. So in the now moment, you are also changing history and changing the future. It's just that that's not where your focus is.
Mm-hmm. So it's a good thing to do that, because it's coming from the right intention, from a heartfelt place, that I can help heal the past. But really, the focus needs to be right now. And if I focus on the right now and I do it the right way, it'll heal the past, which is actually the present.
Of course. Let us explain time to you like this.
Please.
If you have the horizontal axis of third dimensional linear time, and you want to actually reset the earth reality for the collective, not just for yourself, but for the collective, the more energy you put your presence into the now moment, and you don't donate it to the past or the future, you're not going back and reviewing, you're not trying to organize your future, but you're here, your vibration and the vibration of many others like yourself who are so conscious, it becomes magnetic. And if that becomes magnetic, guess what happens to the linear time? It starts to fold in towards you, which means that the past and the future now start to agree with who you are in this moment. And you don't just do it for yourself, you do it collectively. And that's what shifts the earth reality into a new paradigm and a new collective timeline.
So and thank you very much, Masters, and welcome. I'm honored that you're here. So from a practical standpoint, what can people, our listeners, do? What can I do? What can Rebecca do? What can we all do to get ourselves closer to being in that present and being able to take advantage of all the space that's out there for us to play around in?
Well, you can't do it by donating your thoughts and your energy to the past or the future, firstly. Okay. Secondly, it's about understanding that the true magnificence of the human design is that you are magnetic in essence. And so if you are in the present moment, you actually start to feel the energy of yourself, and you actually start to feel the potency of your own presence. Bring your attention back to your body. Can you feel the energy within yourself? That is your gift. That is your power. And the more that you do that, the more time and reality starts to shape itself in accordance with your vibration. So it's not about thought intent. I am intending that this is what I want to achieve. It's about being the pure magnetic presence that allows the earth reality to begin to shape itself in accordance with that vibration. And if enough of you are doing that, the collective timeline begins to shift to shape itself in accordance with that frequency. So that's your gift. It is not a time for application of energy into a timeline. If you're trying to apply your energy into your future, if you're trying to apply your energy into the past, you're reinforcing it. Rather, be you who you are. Be aware that your superpower is your magnetic presence, and watch as everything starts to shape itself in accordance with you. This is why you are here at this time. You are not here to attend to the past. You are not here to hope for the future. You are here to be present.
Since we're communicating right now, Masters, there's a lot of concern with what's going on with our planet right now, and there's also a lot of talk about, oh, this is a time of ascension, and some people are ascending, and people are thinking there's going to be some great shift and some events whether it's a solar flare or an announcement or disclosure or whatever. And when you factor in that time is not linear, are people way off in their consideration that they think something's going to happen like right now? And because everybody wants to know, like, when is all this change going to happen?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because what we've just described is that the more conscious humans that are in the present moment, the more the timeline starts to fold in towards you. So what happens when the conscious ones are waking up and the timeline starts to fold in? Suddenly they start to see things in history that they weren't perhaps aware of that's very concerning. And suddenly they start to see things in the future that they weren't aware of, and it becomes very concerning. Everything starts to become exposed. And so the invitation then is not to panic and say, we need to change it. The invitation here is to say, I'm becoming aware of what this matrix of time and belief was all about with humanity, because it's starting to bend upwards towards me. So that's not the time to jump out of your present moment and try to change it or fix it. Be aware that it's becoming exposed because it's starting to align itself with a new frequency of vibration. So this is the time where it's about exposure. And what can often happen is you can see things that are ahead that become alarming and you wish to change it. Stay where you are. Give it an opportunity to reshape itself to your vibration. So the question here is when it will occur actually in a now moment experience. And what we mean by that is that it will be a spontaneous experience. Now, you may say to us, is that going to occur collectively?
That was my question, yes.
When it happens for you, it will seem as if it's happened for many, because there will be agreement. There will be those that are saying, it's happened, can you feel it? And your invitation is to not then look for evidence in the bending timeline to say, well, those people over there don't feel it, it hasn't happened. Because remember, there is a wave of you that go first before the rest of you catch up.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Anything that we need to know collectively and also personally at this time, since I have you here?
Of course. Well, this is a time where, as you know, as that timeline begins to bend towards that energy of wholeness that you're sitting in from time to time in your spontaneous moments. And we do want to say that your family is bringing you a lot of joy with that. It's very important for you, your family, because they're the moments that you are present. That is their gift to you. You are present with them, and there is the joy. So amongst others and collectively, you can see there's a lot of turbulence happening at this time. There's a lot of disruption, a lot of
Okay, we have a little frozen area right now at the 36-minute mark. Okay, we're back.
And then there's panic if they feel that they cannot change the future or change the past. So while you're watching all of this turbulence, we would wish you to see it like waves on the ocean. And what many humans do is they either get caught up in the waves in the ocean and it throws them around, or they decide to drop into their knowingness. They give up and they say, I'm just going to drop back into source. I'm going to go into my meditation, and they drop into the ocean. And this is something that you've experienced, Agree, and many who are listening. They will say, well, I'm just going to let go. But there is an opportunity at this time for awakening humans, for very conscious humans to say, well, I've done many years of sitting in source. I've had many years of dropping and surrendering and saying that I'm letting go. And you go very quiet and you're largely invisible. But let us say that this is the time for the awakening human to become very visible. This is not the time to go into the cave. This is the time where, instead of sitting in the current and letting go and letting God and all of those approaches, it's now time to get up on top of those waves and to let the momentum carry you to something new. So it's a very powerful time right now if you know that you can surf the turbulence, which means you can see it, you can acknowledge it, and you're going to use it as momentum to carry you into a completely new era of your experience. That's why we say, for those who are conscious, this is a time of great movement and acceleration. But it's not because you're donating energy to a system, it's because you have the grace and the balance on your surfboard to say, let's see where this momentum's going to take us. And so it's a very powerful, fertile, creative period for conscious humans right now. There's a lot of speed and acceleration available. If you lose your balance, of course, you're going to drop into the waves, and then you have to drop back into source again and try and ride it again. But that's the challenge at this time.
From a personal standpoint, what is it that I need to do or can do to I don't want to say take advantage of this, but be of as much service as I can to myself, to my family, and to the collective?
Well, just as any surfer knows, when they're on top of the waves, they know that they're at one with it. They also know the power of it, but they don't actually want to fall off into it. Agree? So
Yes.
This is where your balance comes in. And it's a wonderful practice, because what you say is, well, I am at one with the wave. I'm not really separate from the collective, but I have the grace to know that I can do something wonderful with this. And so for you personally, the turbulence that's happening around you can be used to actually drive you further into visibility, drive you further into your creative pursuits, to allow you to actually have more momentum and more exposure and more visibility. So it's not about how do we quell the waves, it's now how does the movement from this propel us forward into something new. So the surfer doesn't shy away from the waves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautifully stated. Thank you so much, Masters. Thank you, Rebecca. Oh.
Peace be with you.
Thank you. Okay. Rebecca's back. I didn't mean to cut them off. I wanted to make sure that
that's all fine.
that was such a pleasant surprise that they came in, and what they had to say was so wonderful. So for the benefit of our audience, our listeners and viewers, when you are channeling, are you aware of everything that's being said, or do you kind of step aside and do you know what's been going on?
No, so I'm aware of everything that's happening. I also get a beautiful visual of everything too. It's like watching a movie. So I don't always retain it all, of course, because my brain would blow up with everything that gets shown. What actually gets channeled verbally is probably about 100th of what is viewed.
Wow. It was so interesting that since I live in Southern California, about a mile from the beach, that they were talking about surfing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's pretty clever. That's pretty darn good. So thank you, Masters, and very helpful information for all of us that we, need to know how to, I don't want to say take advantage of, but be able to ride the wave and keep our wits about us. And if it does get choppy out there, you just got to look ahead and anticipate. And these are some of the things I always do my best teaching my son about. And I think for everybody, being in the present moment and anticipating and enjoying each moment and the expansion of it is so important to us.
Yes, and I think particularly at this time, because it is so turbulent, to be the surfer and to use that turbulence as a foundation for our own joy and acceleration and movement it's a challenge, but it's our great opportunity.
Well, it also seems for light workers or people who want to work on the ascension or spiritual unfoldment, whatever, in any gradation of that it's difficult, because you can tell with your own honor. I don't mean you personally, but we can tell with our friends, those of us who are working on some of these things, and we have friends, and you end up you can talk about football and rock and roll or whatever, and those are great things, but there's certain people that you connect with on a different level on this stuff, and there's others that you just they're just where they are. And you wonder, like, are they getting it, or am I being, I don't want to look, you don't want to look down on other people, but you want to just say, okay, everybody's on the same journey and they're in a different part of the journey, and just say, you know what, whatever. So enjoy them for the things that you enjoy them for, because I think what we don't want to do as we go into this period of unfoldment and ascension for a lot more people as they're waking up, that they don't say, well, I got it and you don't know what's going on, because it's very easy to fall into that, because we have such division in our country here and in the world now, where it's like you're this or you're that. I mean, everything from, even with the pandemic and everything, it became so political, and it's not really, it was never a political issue, but it became political. So it seems like everything is you're this or you're that. How do we deal with that, Rebecca?
And that is the peak duality experience. I mean, we're at peak duality. The timeline is folding. So we're more aware than ever before of dualistic experiences. So because we know we're at that peak now, it's going to be everywhere, black and white. And I think, again, it's not a question between, am I getting caught up in the waves, or have I dropped beneath it? I'm a little bit more conscious. There's us and them. Now it's about rising above that and saying, well, here is change, here is momentum. I'm going to enjoy the moment. Mm-hmm. And for people around us who are struggling, it's difficult when you're a compassionate person, because you feel the need to save them from it or to change it for them. But a wonderful approach, I feel, is gratitude, and say, wow, this person's really struggling. But I know at this moment, their consciousness is with the waves, and I'm so grateful, because that's what's propelling me forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Excellent. Beautifully stated, as always. So Rebecca Dawson, our special guest on Guys Radio. Rebecca, where can folks find out more about you and all your wonderful works?
Oh, well, I have a website. It's just my name, RebeccaDawson.net. And there's a lot of free content on there. I've got a YouTube channel. Yeah, there's lots of things you can engage with there.
well, I'm so glad you came back to the show, and I'm sure we'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Robert.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys Radio and Guys TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thank you.